Hey guys, this is Coach Chris, and today we're going to be going over my biggest strength in Taekwondo and, in my opinion, the best thing you can be doing for your game right now while in quarantine. For those of you who are new here, what we normally do in my channel is we look at international level fights and we break down strategies and tactics that you can use in your own game. But most of us are in quarantine right now. I'm going over a little bit more technical stuff and stuff I feel like people who are specific to sparring can use to increase their Taekwondo game. My biggest weapon in Taekwondo hasn't really been my technique. My biggest weapon has been my mental game, in my opinion, and that's what's carried me from being someone who got cut from 3 teams when I was 12 and crying myself to sleep to eventually where I am now. From 2012 to 2019 on national team, I made Collegiate team. The rest of my stuff is in my bio, but the biggest thing for me has always been mental game, and it's really been the biggest difference maker for me in my Taekwondo career. From 4 to 12, I was completely terrible at Taekwondo. I was training with 3 different teams, and I had kind of been cut from every team. So I got really upset. I remember I told myself I was going to be so good at this game that everyone was going to regret not picking me. My dad does a lot of research, and so he looked at the Olympians and what was the biggest difference maker. And a lot of people hear that rule. Mental game is a big part of the game at the highest level. So what does that entail? What do I have to study? And so I got this book called Thinking Body, Dancing Mind. And that opened all the doors. A lot of athletes train physically. There's different levels of flexibility that an athlete can reach. There's a diet plan and all of this other stuff. And one of the things that most athletes don't train was the mental game. And I was like, well, that's pretty cool because I'm definitely not physically gifted at this. So how do we fix this mental game? And so before you guys all click off and are like, oh, I've heard about this before, I'll tell you guys my story with it really quick. And then if you want to click off after that, cool. And for those of you guys who are staying on, I'm going to go into the 2 things to focus on and the 2 ways you can kind of do it. And both of them are beneficial to the way you can play the game. To give you guys a reference point, I think when I was 15, before there were state competitions in the US, there were 6 regional tournaments, six regional tournaments. And then you had to place in the top 4. The top 4 of those people move on to nationals, and the top 4 of those people at nationals go on to team trials, and then everyone fights at team trials, and then you're on national team. So when I was 15, I had attempted to try for national team. That's kind of when I was starting to train hard. And so training hard, I mean training 2 to 3 times a day while in high school. And so what ended up happening was I didn't medal at all in the first tournament, in the first regional I went to. So I flew to another regional, didn't medal. And then we had to fly to Minnesota, and I just barely took 3rd. So I just barely went to nationals. I got to nationals, and I gapped my first fight by the national team member. And I flew home that day, and I was really devastated. Just my parents had, parents tell you not to pressure yourself about it, but I couldn't help but thinking about how much time had my dad invested in me, and I got gapped. That was painful to go through. The difference for me was I looked at the mental game, and I was like, okay, I'm gonna take this and I'm going to really run with this and see where this brings me. If this book, or if mental game is really the biggest difference maker between someone who wins at the Olympics and someone who doesn't win, then this is my best shot. Because dude, I'm telling you guys, I was not physically that gifted when I was younger. Part of the thing they train is seeing yourself do things in first person. One of my biggest weapons now is an op ball to the face. And so when I was 15 though, I didn't have that, and I was like, well, I fight right leg back a lot, at least I did at the time. What I did was I'm gonna need a left leg op ball to the face. That's just the next step for my games. I'm gonna need a left leg op ball. So in the morning, I'd close my eyes and I'd imagine someone coming in at me, and I'd flick that left leg op ball. It was like a workout. I did it 15 times, 3 sets, and then I worked on another technique or visualize something else. I did that morning and night. I didn't think it was gonna be super effective until I went to the regional when I was 16. And at 16, I was fighting a named fighter, and I personally don't like naming people just so they don't get embarrassed. So anyway, I'm fighting this guy who's pretty good, and I remember specifically he came in at me once. We were open stance. He came in at me, and my left leg just flicked up to his face, and as it hit him in the face, I went, dude, no way, this actually works. After that, I dove right into it. The book talks about you try and visualize just when you wake up and just before you go to bed. It can hit your subconscious better, and it recommends 15 to 20 minutes. And I had gotten so hyped about this. I did 40 minutes at a time. I woke up extra early in the morning, and I visualized, and then come home, and then I'd visualize, and then I'd go to training. I would eat or do homework, whatever, go to second training, And then before I went to bed, I'd visualize again. One piece of evidence I kind of read before I dove into all of the visualization on my own was they took a basketball team and they divided them into two equal teams. And they had one team, and they had this team just practice throwing free throws just with the ball. Normally just had them practice after training, and they used that to attempt to increase the free throw shooting percentage or whatever. And then they had this other team, and what they had them do is they didn't even let them touch the basketball, and they just had them visualize shooting a basketball. And the team that visualized shooting the basketball ended up being the team that increased their free throw shooting percentage. Now I'm going to teach you guys how to do it. There are three basic parts to it. One is the relaxation part. And if you've not been used to meditating or relaxing, the way they teach in the book is 5 seconds in, try and inflate your belly. So 5 seconds in, hold, and then 5 seconds exhale, and do that 5 times. And usually at that time, your body's at a state of like more relaxation than it normally was. And so you can start from there. It's generally advised you keep your eyes closed, and you kind of just let whatever is going to form first. And then you can start, directing the way it looks. So that's number one, is to get relaxed. Number two, it's called an anchor, something that you can do to relax. So my anchor was touching my index and thumb together. And so in a state of relaxation, I would literally just do this motion and think to myself, when I do this motion, I'm going to be relaxed. Or everything else that I would affirm to myself, when I do this motion, blah, blah, blah. Your mind is training, do this motion, like your body kind of knows to relax already. And so that's what an anchor does. Number one, get relaxed. Number two is the anchor. And number three, the biggest thing is you need to visualize from the first person point of view. And so if you're visualizing yourself at a tournament, but you're in the stands, that's not helping you. That's like a fantasy. That's like the basics. I'd recommend practicing that. In the book, they talk about some people have a hard time seeing stuff when their eyes are closed in their own minds. And the book recommends like looking at anything nature like, and then close your eyes and try and recall all the details you can. Do that for a couple of days, and eventually when you close your eyes, you're going to be able to recall things much, much easier. I would suggest really just go getting the book, Thinking Body, Dancing Mind. Number one, you can use it to adjust any characteristic of your game. And so I'm talking about like if any part of the game outside of your actual gameplay has affected you negatively before, you need to visualize that. And so, for example, it's the referee giving a bad call. So let's say he was holding and because of that you fell over, but he gives you the gumjang for falling over. That's not really in your control. That's the ref's control. But you shouldn't let the ref's bad call throw your whole game off, because if you're sitting there thinking like, oh my god, this ref sucks, blah blah blah, and the game is going, that's mental energy you could be using to beat your opponent and get those points back that are going to the ref, which isn't helping you in any situation at all. What you'd do is in your mind, you'd visualize being in the match, you'd visualize the referee giving you a bad call or a gumjang or whatever, and then you tell yourself a little affirmation, like a deep-rooted tree, I'm centered and free. And then I'd do my anchor, and then I'd see the bad call happen again in my mind, like a deep-rooted tree, I'm centered and free. And then I'd imagine myself not minding the bad call and continuing to fight as best as I could. And so what that ended up doing was it kind of rewrites your brain into like, when a bad call happens, this is the route you take. You don't get mad, you just refocus on the game. Instead of when the ref gives you a bad call, you just like spiral out of control, and then you like can't play the game, and then afterwards you're like, oh, I didn't win because the ref blah blah blah. That's not the case, man. Like another example is if you get really, really nervous, and this is a big one, what you can do is close your eyes, and then you visualize being in a holding area and warming up, and then walking out to the ring, and then doing the match. As soon as that happens, you would reset and then come up with an affirmation. I just focus on me and my play. Then you'd reset, and then you go back to holding area. And you think about being in holding. You think about seeing all the other people there. You think about walking to the arena and seeing the giant crowd, or maybe even the crowd cheering for the other player. So you imagine that happening. And then in your mind, just quietly, you dismiss the crowd and you just focus on your opponent. And then you go back and you just redo that over and over again until you're like not nervous anymore. Whatever area that is outside of the game that's affecting you, you imagine that going in the best way possible. And if you can't control it, then you just kind of dismiss it and be like, that doesn't apply to my level of play, not going to worry about it. And then you reset it, and you just keep going through that until a non-factor. So that's kind of one way to use it. The other way to use it is literal actual training. In this one, let's say you have a combination you're working on, or there's a move you want to hit. All you do is you close your eyes and you think about in first person, what's it going to feel like in my body to actually throw that kick? And you imagine yourself throwing the kick. So it's like a fast kick, or in this case, it'd probably be like a cut kick or a cut axe. You visualize and you kind of feel in your body, how does it feel to actually throw the cut axe kick with my left leg that's, maybe not very good at. And then you just train that in your mind repeatedly. So you give yourself sets and reps. So do, for example, because in your mind you have infinite amounts of energy, so like 20 reps for 4 sets before I do another exercise. Even though you're not actually physically doing the exercise, your mind is still sending the signals to your muscles like, this is what needs to be happening. Which is why if you're thinking about a technique you haven't done before, your mind, it feels weird physically. If you think about throwing a left leg Nadaban, it'll feel weird in your body if you're doing it right, especially if it's a new technique. And if it feels weird, don't worry about it. You just keep visualizing, you keep practicing those reps until it comes out naturally for you. There are 2 people who influenced me with this. One of them was, if you guys watch the Juice Compound, they have produced great stuff. Tim Thackeray came to a Stanford camp once and he talked about mental game. He had us close our eyes and telling us how to visualize and like how to visualize a progression. So I watched progression theory first from him. I had heard about it before from other coaches, but I had never seen someone execute it so well until I watched Tim Thackeray. And he was the Pan Am king, and he was going against one of our juniors, and I had never seen someone predict so many reactions before in my life. It seemed like no matter what the other guy did, and this guy was like decently good, Tim was always one step ahead. And then I remember him breaking down like, when I do this, I know your next expectation is probably gonna be to do this, so I adjust for that already. And then if I go right away, this is gonna be the next expectation. And he's the one who helped me visualize progressions. I thought about doing it on my own, and then Tim kind of confirmed, yeah, you should be doing this on your own. So the second person who influenced my visualization, he probably doesn't know, but James Howe. The reason he has influence is because he used to train in California before, and there's sometimes where I'd have to hold paddles for him because he's got this really big tournament coming up. And I remember specifically there's one time he was like almost at his peak. He was about to leave for Worlds or something like that, and so like he's like primed, like ready to go. James was doing double kicks or like a bullet, and he was kicking so fast I literally could not see his kick. Like, I don't know how to explain how fast someone has to be kicking for me to not see it, but I'd see the initial motion, and after the second kick I knew that I can't wait to see his foot hit the paddle because it's going to be too late. As soon as that first foot leaves, I need to be dropping the first paddle because it's going to meet somewhere there, and then the second hit is going to hit. The second kick is going to be there. It had not dawned on me that someone could be that fast until I saw James actually doing it, and I was like, what the hell? What I took from that was, when I'm visualizing, I'm not looking for the kick specifically anymore. I'm looking for the initial motions. And so whenever I visualized, the person I was visualizing and I'd be fighting against was always way faster than me. All this kind of came to fruition when I was like 19, and what had happened was I had lost at Collegiate Nationals, and that was like devastating for me because I had visualized and I saw myself winning, and I saw myself fighting all these people, and I saw myself fighting like super well and going against people who were really good in my mind and beating them. And I ended up losing in sudden death in the final, and I was super upset. I cried outside for like 15 minutes. But we get our stuff, and my dad's like, don't worry, there's team trials. I think that was about a month and a half or a month. And so what I did was I visualized morning, afternoon, and night, because I'm in college now, so you can coordinate your classes in college. So morning, afternoon, and night, I fought the team member for this spot 2 or 3 times per session. I had visualized beating him on a daily basis multiple times. Day of the competition comes, first match is kind of close, but I was able to pull it out. And then the second match, I pull it out, and I get my stuff and I get dressed, and then I go back to my dad. My dad is ecstatic because I just like made national team. Like, this had been the goal since I was like 14. Like, this is like the goal is to make a national team, because I didn't make junior national team, unfortunately. I just made a national team, and I was super excited, or my dad was super excited. And I walked back, and my dad goes, like, why aren't you more excited? And not to be like arrogant, but just the matter of factly was, when I fought him in my head, he was better. From then, I took a break in 2010. 2011, ended up winning U.S. Nationals, and then 2012, I flew to the Philippines, and the rest of the history. So for you guys who are still with me, thank you for staying with me. Those of you who are pretty hardcore about this, the other part they talk about in the book is write down on a note card what your affirmation is. So let's say you're working on not getting super pissed when the ref makes a bad call. So you'd write on a card whatever your affirmation is. Mine was like a deep-rooted tree, I'm centered and free. And I put that on my binder for school, and I put that on my mirror inside the bathroom, and I put that just by my bed when I wake up. So every morning I'd wake up, I'd visualize I'd visualize doing the training, for example. I'd visualize 1 or 2 times of the deep rooted tree and centered and free, blah, blah, blah. And every time I saw the note card, I'd have to say it to myself and visualize the situation and then redo it. And then when I got to brush my teeth, I'd have to do the same thing. And then when I went to school and I pulled out that binder, I'd have to do the same thing. When I put away my binder, I'd have to do the same thing, et cetera, et cetera. So you're constantly just reprogramming the, like, this is what's supposed to happen when this circumstance happens. And that took my game from getting gapped at nationals when I was 15 to making it to the finals of junior nationals the next year. Same program, same everything. The only difference was I went hardcore into the mental game, and that's really what made my game completely different. It took me to whole new levels in Taekwondo. So I hope it does the same for all of you. Thank you.